Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Healed and Chilled. We are back again for another amazing episode, and we have yet another awesome, wonderful special guest. And you guys know how I like to do it here. I like for my guests to have control of the narrative. So, if you would, in your own words, from your own point of view, can you please introduce yourself and we'll dive right into the interview?
Yeah, sure. My name is Dr. Fred or Fred Moss, or Dr. Moss is what I used to be called, and I'm a psychiatrist. But I'm unlike any psychiatrist that most of you have ever met. I am called the undoctor. And as the undoctor, I undiagnose people, unmedicate people, and then undoctrinate people, helping them get out or stay out of the psychiatric industrial complex because it turns out that diagnoses and medications don't do what they're marketed to, what they say they'll do. And so
Mm,
I am really a big proponent of um, human connection being at the heart of all healing, of all types, of all kinds, of all conditions. And that's the way my practice has morphed. I've been a psychiatrist for over 36 years, and I've been in the mental health field for over 45 years. And here in January, it'll be 46 years. And yeah, it's been a storied career, and I'm, really out to helping people without the trauma that comes along with diagnosing them with something wrong and the definite trauma that comes along when we start treatments and or medications which perpetuate the symptoms they're marketed to deal with. Yeah.
mm. That's quite interesting. So let's get into how did you end up into this space? Was it something that you always wanted to be like sort of like a change agent in the way that healing was produced, or was it something that over time you started to notice that perhaps we need to be readjusting?
Yeah. So, I didn't know that I would become a psychiatrist. I had tried a couple other things. I just really wanted to learn how to communicate. And ever since I was a child, I would watch my two brothers and my parents talk to each other. And I just wanted to learn how to be a big boy and communicate. And I thought that that would
Mm,
happen in the elementary school, but it didn't happen in elementary school. I was just told to sit down and be quiet and do what the
mm,
teacher does. And then later on in junior high, same thing. I was just told to sit down and be quiet. And then same thing in high school. And it was like, wow, I guess I'm not going to learn how to communicate while I'm in school. So I
mm,
tried college. I thought, well, college must be the place where people learn how to communicate. And I
right.
went to the University of Michigan, but that wasn't that, I learned how to communicate in Ann Arbor, but I didn't learn how to communicate at the University of Michigan. And
Mm,
so I eventually dropped out and came across the country on a bus to Berkeley, California, so I could learn how to communicate and figure out what my life was about. And I had a good summer in Berkeley. And it was really, I did learn a lot about myself, but it was unsustainable. And eventually I went back to school one more time and tried computers. That was the next thing. There was like this new industry called computers, and I thought I might be good at it. And, I sat in the only computer that was in Michigan that was worthwhile was at the University of Michigan. And so I sat in that building called a computer building for, night after night doing punch cards and batch jobs and stuff. And I was like, no, this isn't it either. So I dropped out one more time. And then after dropping out one more time and promising never to go back to college ever again, my mom was like, well, you got to get a job. And she got me a few different applications. And one of them was at a state mental health facility for adolescent boys. And so I began being a child care worker that day in 1980, January 5th, as I said, 46 years ago. And um, the rest is history. I mean, I just saw at that point, I could really see how the machine was working. And I really learned to eventually really like that job because all I had to do was communicate with these people like they were just people. That's all I had to
mm,
do. I didn't, not treat them like patients or like mentally ill or something like that. Just treat them like humans who are bumbling through the world just like me. And I was very effective. But the thing I didn't like was psychiatry. And I decided that, psychiatry was going very chemical and very restraining, chemical restraints and physical restraints. And I just
Mm,
thought that isn't aligned with who I am. So I'm going to go into psychiatry as well, but I'm going to bring the whole power of human connection at the heart of healing
mm,
into the field. And it's been a struggle. I've done whatever I've done. It's the field has shifted so much and really no longer circulates around communication. But communication is the essence, and whether or not the field has shifted or not, I'm quite aware that what we want as humans more than anything is to connect with another human being. And when that happens, that's when the miracle of healing actually takes place.
mm. Very, very, very well said. And I want to really dissect and dive into what you mean about communication, because someone can say, oh, well, when you were in elementary school, you were talking to people, or middle school, high school, and in the different aspects of life. But what do you mean when you really say communicate? Because I definitely agree there's a difference, but what does that actually mean?
Well, in communication, we're open and free to speak our truth, and we're open and free to listen to other people's truth. And
Mm,
communication is normally done through this verbal method that we're using right now, this speaking and listening, and then processing, and then speaking back and listening back and processing. These exchanges through words we think are communication. And communication comes when I'm free to speak that which I think or that which I feel, openly and honestly, using words that can help me describe whatever my experience is.
mm,
However, communication, you're right. I suppose I was talking to some people in elementary school, but I was frequently told that what I was saying was not acceptable.
mm,
What I was, it wasn't like I was a big joker. I was very bored in elementary school. I was pretty precocious and I talked a lot. There's no teacher in elementary school who forgot having Fred as a student because I talked. I just did talk because I just was bursting at the seams, wanting to communicate what I was seeing, what I was feeling, what I was, thinking. Um,
mhm,
and it was highly discouraged. So, in open communication,
mm.
we come to grips with our core values, our central self, our authentic, genuine nature, and we speak from there. And in otherwise thwarted conversation, like I would say the conventional school system is built around, we're told to only say things that are within lines, that are
Yep.
like what the teacher wants us to say. And if we say anything different, we're generally disciplined and put back in our seat.
Yep. And it sucks, but that's actually very, very true. And I work with children as well, but thankfully not in the traditional school system. And so I'm not necessarily bound by rules in terms of that. But it is so important that, especially as children, that they know you're allowed to have your opinions, you're allowed to have your thoughts, and you're allowed to say what you want to say. And sometimes, like, because I have like virtual clubs, sometimes the kids, like, maybe they don't want to do what I want them, like they don't want to answer this particular question. But instead of like making them, we might do a weird little dance, or we might like talk and change, totally veer off. But it's so important, like you're saying, that children and everyone learn how to communicate, because that's how you can regulate your emotions. That's how you can
Mm-hmm.
regulate when things happen to you that you're not in control of, and all of these different things. So that's from my side. But from your perspective, and having your schooling and experience, why is it important that we know how to communicate? Like, what can happen if we don't know how to communicate properly, and if we feel like we can't communicate?
So feeling like you can't communicate isn't the same as not being able to communicate. So first of all, you can have all sorts of feelings. You can be afraid that if you communicate, then you might get hurt or you might disrupt or you might get dismissed or disregarded. So a lot of people choose not to communicate because they're afraid of, getting thrown off the island or being uh, uh, dismissed. And so it isn't true even in that setting that you couldn't communicate. And so what we're really learning is that in order to communicate, which is what we're all after, ultimately we're all after being understood, being seen for who we are and
Mm-hmm.
who we're not, and being resonated with and connected with, being harmonically connected with by another person or another group of people. And if we don't communicate effectively from our true self, if we're instead pretending to be someone that we're not
Mm.
in order to protect the person that we are, then we'll never be known for who we are, because we won't be delivering who we are. And if that's like the greatest shame in the world, the greatest a tragedy in the world. And I think it was Henry David Thoreau who said that the mass of men go through life in quiet desperation and then go to their graves with their songs still in them, meaning that,
Wow.
some people go through life and never get known by anybody. And I can't even imagine how tragic that really is ultimately. You get one chance here, and if you're going to keep pretending to be someone that you're not, no one will ever get to
Mm.
know who you really are. And so open and honest communication is our way of expressing our truest core of self.
Mm. And so what happens to like us as individuals if we don't express that? Because some can say that, oh, well, why should you be able to express yourself? I can't express myself. But I think that it's one of those things that keeps perpetuating cycles of things that, if we're not open and honest about atrocities or tragedies that happen, then perhaps they can keep occurring. And if we don't address things and if we don't work together, communicate and build, then things that are plaguing our community will continue. But from your perspective, like what could happen if we don't communicate properly, if we don't have open spaces, if we're not ourselves? And there are some who feel like restriction is better. Like everyone shouldn't be themselves. You should be like everyone else. You should do this thing. So what would you say as an argument to that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about should or shouldn't. There is a massive restriction when we're not allowed to speak our truest self, and I think that goes without saying. And those people who think that we should not be allowed to speak, they are allowed to think whatever they want to think. But in a world where freedom is emphasized and amplified and glorified, freedom comes with freedom of communication. If we look at even the United States Constitution, the freedom of speech is the First Amendment for a reason. It's because it's the most important amendment, and without that particular amendment, the whole Constitution would fail. The idea
Mm,
is that what we're really talking about is the capacity to speak what we know and know what we speak and actually get our points across. And speaking doesn't have to come through voices. It can come through creativity as well. For instance, uh, art or music or dancing or singing, drama, cooking, writing, gardening. These are some of the ways that I illustrate in The Creative Eight, my first book, The Creative Eight, Healing Through Creativity and Self-Expression, that are
mm,
forms of communication. But we already know that when we get our communication choked out, it creates some massive agitation and sometimes even
mm.
creates what we call somatic equivalence of physical illness when we're not expressing ourselves. It's sort of like my wife sometimes says is, if you uh, if you close the door, it'll still come out of the windows. The stuff just
Hmm.
squeaks out. We find ourselves communicating whether or not we are given
Mm.
an opportunity to do so. And you can't really pretend to be somebody that you're not effectively. And we sometimes do choose to pretend to be someone we're not so that we will protect the person that we are, but it's not effective. It's ludicrous. It's actually absurd and preposterous. And yeah, it never worked for anybody, and it's not working for anybody today either.
Period. Okay. Yeah, and I definitely agree. And to add, I'd like to go a little bit deeper into your book as well, because as someone who is a creative, I can say, like, when I first got out of school, like the traditional, like, okay, you're out of college, now you're in the workforce. And so I was only working, I wasn't really doing like, anything else. And my whole life, I had been in creative activities one way or another, whether it was dance or this or that. And I was miserable, just like going to work and home and like nothing else. And so then, with the creative outlets and things, not only did I really realize I had more energy, but like just day to day life, the mundane wasn't as bad. Things and life didn't affect me as much. And so when I don't have a creative outlet or am serving my purpose or passion, whether it's through this or that, then I notice my mood is off. So can you talk about your book and like how creativity works with healing and how communication ties into like all of that?
Yeah, sure. So this was it's a fun and easy book, a kind of an easy read, generally pretty short, and we talk about the multiple ways of communicating over and above just the speaking, processing, and listening, and then exchanging. The one we're doing right here, the typical way of communicating is to, talk and listen and absorb and then process and then talk back and listen and absorb and process. There are other ways to communicate, as I mentioned, specifically in the performing arts and in the visual arts, like art, music, dancing, singing, drama, cooking, writing, and gardening. And then cleaning and photography got added on there, number 7 and 8. I'm sorry, number 9 and 10. And there was, the creative 8 is those 8 things. And what I learned, what I saw, what I observed is that when people are being creative, when they're communicating using one of these so-called alternative means, non-speaking listening, um, their symptoms or their pain or their suffering or their worries or their regrets or their negative, imbalanced, misaligned experiences tend to go away. So
Mm,
when we're actually, blowing on a horn or painting on a canvas or dancing on a dance floor or singing, in the shower or in our car, our symptoms, our concerns, our painful experiences
mm,
tend to diminish significantly, and in many cases actually disappear during the creative act. So if that's the case, then when we're done with the creative act, we get to make a choice about whether or not to go right back to where we were when we were experiencing our symptoms, or actually step forward from that creative act without
mm.
experiencing the symptoms now that we have just been released. And that was one of the things that I was exploring.
Wow. So can you elaborate a little bit more on that or do like because that's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, look, we have a choice at any given moment to see the world however we see it. The data doesn't change that much, and we can be really depressed, really anxious, really afraid. We can be really distracted, feel really awkward. We can feel really hopeless. We can feel confused. We can feel like worried or regretful or resentful, or we can feel jealous or angry or terrified. We have many different experiences that are available to us. And what I've really noticed is that with all those experiences, when we finally can communicate, when we can find another person who understands our experience, who relates to it, who at least is able to give us a sense of resonating with it, then our entire experience in life shifts that drastically at that very moment. There's like an explosion with that connection. I'm sure you felt it where you're talking to
Mhm.
someone and you feel like, oh yeah, they're right on board with me. Like there's this magical feeling that some people even equate to love when that happens. And um, when we actually tap into being our genuine, authentic, highly effective communicating self, then the symptoms, there's no, all of a sudden the whole idea of being able to be someone different right now than I was before becomes available. I
Mm.
can be really depressed all day long and then like, see or be with somebody and be revitalized by the fact that there's a connection and now I don't have to be depressed anymore for the rest of the day. Or
Yeah.
like many people do, I can choose to go right back to depression if I want. I mean, I'm not sure why I
Mm.
would do that, but we do have the capacity to bounce right back because we think, oh, we have depression, so we're not allowed to really be non-depressed because
Mm.
I have a clinical depression, so when left to my own accord, I'm supposed to maintain a certain baseline of depression. But depression is not a psychiatric illness. Depression is simply just one of the many emotional states that are available to us humans bumbling through the human condition.
Mm, yes, 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 yes. So the next thing would be then for someone who is into that cycle, it's like, well, easier said than done. Easier said to not go back into that. Because what if they're like, well, I'm not choosing it? And, or maybe they didn't even know that they had a choice. You know, a lot of times people, especially as growing up from children age, you're taught like, this is how you feel. This is it. You can't control your feelings. You can't control your feelings. But from what you're saying, you can control at least some aspects. So how do you even recognize that you have the choice to feel a different way? And then how do you get out of that victim mindset of like, well, no, I can't choose differently, and to recognize that you actually can, and keeping that.
Yeah, people tend to go with I can't, as somehow it's like coming upon you from the outside as if you don't have a choice of the next thing to say or the next thing to do. But if we all look at it, we see we have all sorts of choices of things to say and
Mm,
things to do. In the next second, you have a choice to say any of thousands of things. And in the next second, you have a choice to do any of a thousand, thousands of things to do. And so, yeah, you can say that I can't, it happens to me. I don't know how to control it. I don't have my own feelings. I can't control my feelings. You could say all that, but the truth is, of course you can. And you already know
mm,
that. Whenever you're driving on a road or something, you have a choice of whether to turn left or turn right or to go straight. And the same goes through with life. You have a choice of continuing to see the world exactly as you do. And if it's working for you, you should do that. Or if it's not working for you, you have an opportunity to see the world in an entirely different way. That's not really very
mhm,
revolutionary of an idea, as it turns out. That's just the nature of what it means to be human. And we have a choice. Our next action is not dictated by the past that we have had. Our next action is available to us to make a choice about thinking, being, and doing whoever we choose to be in the next moment. And, that's
mm,
just being honest about what it truly is here to be human. Yes, there are pulls and temptations to be maybe sometimes even counterproductive, but that doesn't mean that we have to do it, even if we feel
mm,
an edge. I mean, sometimes I walk by a pizzeria and I get a thought that I should eat that whole pizza. That doesn't mean that I'm going to walk in there and I need to eat the whole pizza. I can have the experience without actually, digging in and taking in that next full pizza.
mhm. So it's really about like making the decision in those moments. Like once you recognize this is what it is, choosing to do something else.
Yeah,
That's
choosing
what's.
to do whatever works for you, which is what you're doing anyways, by the way. When you choose
Mm,
depression, it's not like depression chose you. When you choose depression, you're
mm,
you're determining that depression is your best choice, and you went right back to depression. It's okay. Some people really determine that being depressed is their right choice, that all things considered, that's all that's left to do, and that I should just be depressed. That's okay. And there's nothing wrong with depression. It's only one of the many, many, many emotional states available to humans. But it certainly doesn't represent any kind of psychiatric illness.
mm. Very well said. Another thought that I had is everybody communicates differently. So how and a lot of miscommunications probably come from people not reading expressions the same way or not understanding, well, this is how this person communicates versus how I communicate. So how can we, like in our everyday lives, stop, I guess, projecting our own ways of communicating on others? Like how can we accept if we've never experienced someone from another place, so let's say, and they communicate differently, how can we maintain our understanding? Like, hey, you don't have to be like triggered by what someone else does, and stop, pause, and respond rather than react.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just a practice. It's really just a muscular practice, like going to the gym. I mean, uh, what you can really go with the basic theory that what people think of me is none of my business at all.
Mm,
I don't have any access to what people think of me, and what people think of me is really up to them. And I don't have to be collapsing. I don't have to collapse or conflate myself into my outward experiences. If someone says something and I feel a sense of sadness, it doesn't actually mean that I need to be sad now. I can
Mm,
actually notice that I feel a sense of sadness, or I feel a sense of fear, or I feel a sense of nervousness. That's okay. It's no problem. Those are some of the human experiences that we have a choice. We just don't have to actually like jump in all, um, all caution to the wind and just become our experiences. So inside of a meditative practice, like when we have meditation or gratitude, when we put together breathing exercises or yoga or Tai Chi, we are able to separate ourselves out from our experiences. And we can get that I'm not my feelings, I'm not my sensations, I'm not my emotions, I'm not my circumstances. I can have all those things, but I don't have to become of those things when they occur, and I then get a real chance to become whoever it is that I want to become, say what I
mm.
need to say, be who I need to be, and think what I need to think, that are maybe more consistent with getting a life that can bring joy, satisfaction, and a sense of contribution.
Yes, yes, yes. Very well said. And I'm just like, because as I'm going through life and the journey as well, sometimes personally, one of my troubles is that I might be okay in general, but then like something happens, and then I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm feeling sad about this, and it takes me
Yeah.
like much less time now, thank goodness, to bounce back. But I don't know, is there a place where you can just be unbothered by like everything, like where you can just be like, I understand from like different principles and philosophies that you can, they say that you can become like a boulder in a stream. Is that really possible, or is there always going to be some sort of like readjustment and then having to resettle?
Well, it isn't like a boulder in the stream doesn't feel the waves crashing up against it. It does. And so you can feel the waves without actually wavering. And so that
Mm,
it becomes really possible to appreciate your feelings, appreciate your sensations, even if they're intense, even if they're acute, even if they're uncomfortable. You can appreciate them without becoming them. So yes, there's definitely a way to stand still and to separate ourselves from the tendency to believe that we are our feelings, or we are our circumstances, or we are our regrets, or our resentments, or our jealousies, or we're our memories, or we're our thoughts. And when we do a meditative or a gratitude practice, when we're able to sit silent, that's like a really great way. We were able to then
mm,
notice that we are not those things. We have those things, but we don't have to become those things. And this leaves open the very real possibility, the very real invitation to be a boulder in the river.
mm. Yes. Yes. So what are some like daily practices that are like really beginner, like easy? Like well, let's say this is for someone who is like, okay, I'm at like this all sounds really great, but what's something that I can do to implement one a real baby step that anybody can do, even if they're a busy parent with multiple children or running around at work? What's something that they can do to just like, hey, I can route back to this, and at least this can help me remember that I have a decision. I don't have to feel this way.
Well, there's a couple things to do, but one thing that comes to mind as you're asking is drink really good water. Drink
Mm,
very high quality water and drink a lot of it. Keep the flow going all day long. Like actually realize
mm,
that life is flowing, life isn't stopped. And when we drink really good water and eat organic foods, and we become the foods and the things we put in our mouth, then that gives us the possibility of having our eyes a little bit wider open. There are many other things. Gratitude is another great one. I wake up in the morning, and before I'm even out of bed, I put my hand on my heart and I say 10 things that I'm grateful for before, out loud. And, my wife is normally lying right next to me, so she'll be number one on the
mm,
list. And then I have my cats, and then the sun and the moon, and my food, and my friends, and my mentors, and my leaders, and my car, and my home. And, there's so many things, my family. It's not
mm,
very hard to come up with 10 things. And I let myself really feel those 10 things. And then shortly after the day has started, um, I also get outside somehow, like get myself, poke my head outside and get a taste of the real, the real world. Because we tend to think that the world takes place inside of our brain or inside of our four walls. And when we step outside and see the vastness of the whole universe, a new perspective is laid down as
Mm.
well. So we can really alter the default way we see the world by taking on some of the behaviors or some of these interventions like meditation, gratitude, being outdoors, yoga, meditation, nutrition, yoga or Tai Chi, or nutrition like organic foods or drinking herbal teas or drinking lots of clean water. There's creativity, like we've already talked about. There's spirituality. It's by spirituality, like coming to grips with whoever your higher power might be, whatever that is, or being of service is a great one. You can help anybody do
Hmm.
anything, and that one works great. Whenever you are feeling down and out or unsure of yourself or unsteady, helping anybody do anything is a great antidote to getting yourself back on your feet.
And I agree with everything, especially for myself, the last one. And that's why actually I have the virtual clubs for the kids because as much as I know that they need me, I need them too. Because
That's
if
right.
but if I go like a week without interacting with the children. And granted, these are like children that I have clubs with, like I said, but like my days are much longer. Everything is a lot harder. So
Yeah.
I need them as much as they need me. So I definitely resonate with that. We are
Yeah.
coming up a little bit on the halfway end point. I'm just wondering, is there anything else that you wanted? I have, of course, a million and bajillion questions, but is there anything that you would like to specifically highlight? Any services, any other books, anything that you wanted to talk about that you haven't had the opportunity to share just yet?
Well, my career has been steady over lots of decades, and I've had leadership roles all over the map. I think I've had a leadership role in every single area that psychiatry has made an impact inside of Western medicine. And, I've had over 30,000 patients and I've written over 100,000 prescriptions, none of which was I happy about at all. And so what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying about that is I think that diagnoses and medications often don't do what they say they're going to do and sometimes actually do the opposite. So sometimes receiving a psychiatric diagnosis can be damaging in its own right. And receiving the medications and or the treatment that are somehow aligned with that diagnosis can definitely be damaging in its own right. So I've started something called the Undoctor Reset. And the Undoctor Reset, where you can find at undoctorreset.com, is a place where people can come and take a look at themselves and start realizing that, they might not need to have a diagnosis. They might not need to have medication, and they might be able to actually leave the mental health field altogether. And what the Undoctor
Mm.
Reset really does is it undiagnoses, unmedicates, and then undoctrinates people, giving them, at least a sign or a path to the doorway so that they don't have to keep coming back to the conventional psychiatric system. And, ultimately, we can all be on doctors because what we're really looking for, as I've made it very clear so far, is we're looking for connecting with another person. And we don't need a
Mm.
degree. We don't need a degree. We don't need a long list of education to learn how to connect with others. You can even make a case that if you do have a degree and you have had multiple years in formal education, you may not be as good as others. You may have been spending too much time
Mm.
doing academics that you forgot what it's really like to connect with another human. And we all
Mm.
benefit at a very high level when we're able to connect with other humans.
Yes. And so what are like some signs to know like if you are connecting with someone in a healthy way or if you're even connected with yourself in a healthy way?
Well, you'll find yourself not stuttering. That's one thing. You won't have to be thinking,
Mm.
what should I say? You no longer will be there, or should I talk? You'll notice yourself openly and honestly communicating back to that same idea of feeling like you have some confidence and assurance that your communication is welcome. And that doesn't mean that other people want to hear from you, by the way. It just means that the space is open for you to communicate when you choose to. And there's a resonating sense of beauty and satisfaction and joy that happens when we connect with another person and communicate our basic truth. I believe that the creator, whatever that is, has made it very clear that when we're being honest and real, when we're being authentic and genuine, when we speak our very real truth and represent it and actually align our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions with each other so that they're all aligned and so that we are really indeed um, in lockstep with our thoughts, feelings, and actions, then there's just a beauty that sets in. You don't have to ask, am I
Mm,
aligned? Just something that actually occurs as if when you're listening to a symphony, you don't have to determine
mm.
whether or not they're in tune.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, I was going to give you this earlier, but I'm going to give you a signature round of applause just because it felt like the right time. That, like, honestly, I think that if more people can accept who they are within themselves, and like you said, it is just like a symphony, and if you listen
It
to
is.
classical music, you'll know exactly what you're saying there. So we are coming up a little bit on the tail end. So I have three cliche questions that I ask everyone at the end. But before that, I have two quick things. One, is there anything else that you really wanted to highlight that you haven't? I know I already asked this, but sometimes it does happen. You're like, oh, it's almost over. I wish I would have said this. Is there anything else that you would have liked to highlight that you haven't yet had the opportunity to?
Well, I think there's lots of things, of course, to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
When left is open grounds, I've mentioned that I have these three cats, and these cats are my life breath in many ways. I'm not with them now. I've been away from home for a couple weeks. I'm down here in
Oh.
Newport Beach, and my cats really teach me how to live. There's something about it's not like you have to be a cat person. I think dogs do this too, and all animals actually do it. But there's something that reminds us of all the additives that humans put into the world in their stories that then change the way they see the world. So what's
Mm,
really exciting about this is if I use my imagination, I can see the world in a very lovely way as well. I can see the world in a very hopeful way. I can see the world in a way
mm,
that makes sense, that I can make it, feel strong or feel empowered or feel free or feel at peace. And that becomes available inside my imagination as well. So I think that maybe if I had to say one more thing, the thing I typically would say is that maybe there's nothing wrong with you at all. Maybe the
mm,
experiences that you're having right now, even if they're uncomfortable, do not represent there being anything wrong with you. It's just
mm,
like we don't blame a log for burning in the fire, and there's a fire going on out here. It's a rough
mm.
life. It's hard being alive. And it's okay to be very uncomfortable in the process.
Yes. I never heard anyone say we don't burn or we don't blame a log for catching on fire when it's on fire. I never heard that, but it paints, I am a auditory, and so it painted a really good, clear picture.
Cool.
Um, awesome. So before the three cliche questions, I'm just curious, do you have any questions for me? Are you curious about anything for me at all or any thoughts?
Well, I noticed that you're wearing a Midsummer Night's Dream shirt, and I wonder about your access to drama as a way of creativity. And is that a show that you watched, or is it a show that you participated in? Were you an actor in the stage play? And there's something beautiful about taking on another form of communication, as the Creative Eight suggests. Actually, the fifth one in the Creative Eight is called drama. So drama
Mm,
is there for A Midsummer Night's Dream, of course. And so I was, it seems to me that you're aligned with this idea that there are multiple ways to look at the world. And, some people dig themselves in as if there isn't multiple ways, but whether they dig themselves in or not, there's still multiple ways. It doesn't matter whether
yep.
they think there isn't, there just is. And so it's no argument. It's just like, we have an opportunity to walk through the world one time here, and
Yes.
we get to choose whether we're going to be like saddled with being disempowered, or are we going to step into some form of strength where we can make a difference?
Mm. Yes, yes. So to answer your question, I was not in the play for Midsummer's Night's Dreams, but I was doing a different communication style, and I'm sure you can appreciate this. So I volunteer for a local museum. And at the museum, they have like in the summertime, they have like jazz at the park. And then they also have like a Midsummer's Night's Dream or like a different Shakespeare play that comes. So I was there as a volunteer and then the photographer didn't show up. So then they're like, oh, well, can you take pictures for us? I'm like, okay, sure. And somehow now I am now their volunteer camera person. So when the actual photographer doesn't show up, now they call me like, are you
Oh,
available? So yeah, so now this shirt has a lot of memories towards it because I
yeah.
love volunteering. I love being out in the community and now I have this memory attached to this shirt and my family came. I took pictures of them and like the mayor came. It was just a really great time. And we were all sitting in the park and the museum is like this old plantation house actually. And so then there's like the garden, the plantation houses in the background. The actors are acting and then everybody from all different ages, colors, creeds, everything. We're just sitting out enjoying this live play and I'm walking around. Can I take a picture of you and catching
Mm,
the happy moment? So, yeah, this shirt
cool.
has a lot of cool memories.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that explanation. Beautiful.
Yes. Did you have any other questions?
No, that's it so far for now.
Alrighty, so I'm gonna ask my three cliche questions, and then I
Yeah.
hope, of course, you have a wonderful day. And you're always welcome back because honestly, I could ask you a million questions all day, and I don't think I'd get tired of hearing your answers. The first
Thank you.
cliche question, of course, is if you can think back to a time when you were younger and in a darker space, what's one piece of advice that you know now that you really wish you would have known back then?
I think the one piece of advice is that it all, there's something like it doesn't come to an end. Like
Mm,
coming to an end is not really an option. Everything just keeps going and going and going. And which means
mm,
that if I stub my toe or if I say something I regret or if I create some damage or disruption, I get to realize that this too shall pass. There's something like this too shall pass that allows me to
hmm
regain steadiness, regain stability, and know that even through the darkest times, even through the times when there's some pain or some misery or some unpleasantness of some nature, that this too shall pass.
Mm. Yes, yes, yes. It's amazing how many people also say that, and it's like to the point, and it's like one of my cliche questions, and it's just interesting because the more you hear it, the more real it is. Like this too shall pass. Like, and if everybody says it, then it must ring true. So,
Mm.
thank you for that. The second question is the internet works in mysterious ways, much like the universe. So we don't know who will listen to this at some point. Is there any person, place, or organization that you would really like to work with if they did hear this podcast?
Mm. Well, I like to take stages. I have plenty to say. I have a very cool set of keynote speeches, whether it's about financial literacy, which is something I really
Mm,
work with to help people get steady in their feet and side of their own finances. And oftentimes that brings a greater degree of satisfaction and security than anything I've ever seen inside of the mental health field. So whether it be
mm,
financial security and financial literacy, or it be about mental health and how mental health as it is right now is quite broken, and there are repairs that are available once we realize that human connection is the source of all healing.
mm.
I can give all. I like being on stages. I like being a podcast guest. I've been on probably 300 shows as a podcast guest. And so
Wow.
I appreciate that. I like being interviewed and learning, like you said, when people ask me questions over and over again, um, I get more solid about what I think about things. And
Hmm.
so I can become a little bit more articulate and a little bit more um, impactful with what I say after getting all the experience that I get as a podcast guest. So I think that, probably, um, yeah, probably that's the thing I would want people to know is that I'm available to speak to your small groups or your large groups or your stages or your podcast. Because look, I'm not saying anything that controversial. I'm saying something that each and every one of us actually knows. There's nobody here saying, no, human connection is not worthy. No, actually it is, and you know it, and everyone knows it.
Hmm.
And so I'm not, that's all I'm being is a proponent for human connection. And that's not, um, because it's not controversial, it can be very attractive as ways to, make it through the world, ultimately reset ourselves so that we're on to listening, caring, and being with other people, whether or not we agree with them.
That part. Oh, righty. And so then the last question, of course, is of course I'll put your link in the description. But if someone, well, it's kind of like a three-parter. If someone wants to contact you, what's the best way to do that? If someone wants to keep updated, like to know what's going on, how can they do that? And if someone wants to support or get your books or work with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so it all happens from the same space. It's called Dr. Fred, drfred360.com. Drfred360.com is a very nice and slick and concise website where you can see everything that I'm doing. And there's a little button inside of the contact form where you can contact me and we can set up an initial call to see how I can be helpful, whether or not there's some coaching available or some groups or some recommendations or maybe some referrals. Be glad to have those conversations with your listeners. And then it also shows all the podcasts that I've been on and all the writings, all my books are available there, and all the ways to, all my connection to my YouTubes. And I have about 1,000 or so, a little bit more than 1,000 videos in my YouTube channel that you can listen to me and watch me. But if you want to stay aboard, this idea of creating a undoctor retreat is really interesting to me. So we're trying to help
Mm,
people who are too far down the hole, having been diagnosed for such a long time and now on lots of medicines, get off the medicine so that they can get their lives back. But not only off their medicine, in order to get off their medicine, we also have to get them off their diagnosis because the person who's sure that there's something wrong with them will continue to
mm,
look for a fix to help them. But what if we really were able to assist people to see that, like
mm,
a log in a fire, there's nothing inherently wrong with being confused or or being angry or being sad or being
mm,
like scared or even being helpless or hopeless. None of those things are inherently wrong. There's nothing wrong with you. We don't blame a log
mm.
for burning in a fire, and life is very difficult. So it's time to really give yourself some compassion for not knowing what the next best right step is to take.
Mm. Yes, 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 yes. I just wanted to thank you so much for joining and sharing all of your wisdom and dropping the gems and gold nuggets of knowledge, understanding, authenticity, compassion, and just well-rounded um, good thinking. And I just so excited to see what occurs for you and things. And I'm in full support. I know that the listeners got a lot because I know I personally did as well, just from our conversation. And there's a lot of I like that you have and what you offer is also like practical solutions that can be easily implemented. A lot of times in like the wellness space, it's like, oh well, just do this and everything will be fine tomorrow. And like that's not actually true. In fact, sometimes going through the thick of it is the hardest part until you can get on the other side. So just salute you for all of those things. And before we go, because I know sometimes it's like, oh, I wish I would have said this last thing once we're at the tail end. Is there anything that you want to leave us off with, or anything that you're like, oh man, I wish I said that earlier?
Well, there is a disclaimer that usually comes. There's probably a group of people in your group here, in your listenership, who are pretty sure that they have the right diagnosis and the right therapist and the right treatment plan and the right medications, and they wouldn't trade it for the world. And it's the best thing that ever happened to them. And they can't believe that I'm saying that, medications and diagnoses are not necessarily the best way to go. Those people who are very sure that they wouldn't want an upgrade even if it was available, my all I have to say is that please keep doing exactly what you're doing. Because if you reach that point in your life, in any area of life where you feel like there's no room for even consideration of an upgrade, then by all means you've reached a very high pinnacle in that life, and you should for sure like embrace that and keep doing it. This conversation is more meant for the tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people who do not feel that way, who feel that the psychiatric system has failed them in some ways,
Mm,
who feel like they're untreated, undertreated, overtreated, mistreated, underdiagnosed,
mm,
overdiagnosed, misdiagnosed, undermedicated, overmedicated, mismedicated. We start looking at those people who are really dissatisfied with having taken on the conventional approach to their mental health issues, and that's who this conversation is for. But I'm not telling people who have already found their answer, their solution, that it's time for them to come off their solution. Not at all. Please keep using whatever solution you find in your life.
mm. Well, I don't have anything to say after that, and I agree. So, with that being said, thank you so much for joining, and you heard it here, folks. Folks, we'll see you for another episode of Healed and Chilled.
Thank you.